Hello and welcome to Kitchen Table Talks. My name is Toni Austin Allen and I am here with Dr. Roy Austin, author of Definitions for Living, a book dedicated to helping you live more effectively and happily, both personally and in your relationships with others. A number of years ago, Dr. Austin compiled numerous articles which he had written to assist his clients into what is now his book, Definitions for Living, making sense of words and ideas that define our lives. Recently, he and I began sitting at our kitchen table and talking about his book, and we became excited about the possibility of sharing our conversations with others who might benefit from them. The podcast you are about to listen to are the product of the recordings we began making of our conversations. We have discussed the book chapter by chapter and have produced this series of podcasts to accompany the printed version of the book, which is now available as an ebook on various publishing websites. Although we believe you will benefit greatly from the podcasts themselves, you will get the most out of them by purchasing the book, reading each chapter prior to listening to the podcast, and having it available to follow along with our conversations. The ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We hope you enjoy our talks at our kitchen table as much as we have, and that your life will be greatly enriched by having shared our conversations with us.
All right, we're on Chapter 7, What I Hope to Accomplish by Criticizing and Punishing Myself. I would bet that this is a very common issue amongst many people you've seen.
I'd say universal.
Let me read a little bit of this first part if I could. Then I'm going to let you just take it from there. Self-criticism and self-punishment are common behaviors for many people. For some, they have become a way of life. Many can remember having put themselves down from early childhood. Most say they learned to do so from having been criticized and punished by their caregivers. And then I'm going to go down a little bit further. They explain that self-punitive behaviors most often, and they I'm not saying this well, but they provide reasons to justify why they do this. Can you talk about that a little bit? How we justify this self-punishment and criticism?
Absolutely. Our world culture does not do a good job of helping us understand human behavior or even animal behavior. All behavior is what we call purposive. That's a fancy term for it. It is designed to accomplish a purpose for accomplishing some goal or outcome in the future. And most people don't know that, Tony. They believe that behavior is caused by something in the past. And this is where we get the word because. I do this or I did this because, and then they will refer typically to something in the past. I'll give you an example. I had a young client one time who had been severely abused by family members. Her mother had been very, very ill and had been in the hospital for a number of years and could not take care of her. And so she had been farmed out by to relatives, and not knowing that this girl's relatives, an uncle, and then a female and a male cousin with whom she lived for quite a bit of time, were very abusive, mixed up, cruel people. And they abused her really, really badly in a number of ways. And when she came to see me, she had a very, very low self-esteem, very low opinion of herself. She saw herself as damaged goods, so to speak, not worth anything, unlovable. And it was really affecting her entire life, including her marriage, because all the love and attention that her husband felt toward her and sought to express to her, she couldn't accept, and she would rebuff him and say, "Oh, I don't deserve that," and so it caused a lot of tension in the home. And so when I asked her to help explain about her lack of well-being or sense of well-being or self-esteem, she said, "Well, I'm just not lovable. I'm worthless because I was abused as a child."
It's that cause and effect.
That's the cause and effect.
The cause was in the past.
Yes. And so that's why she had always been stuck throughout her young life of feeling good about herself, because, as we know, nothing in the past can be changed. It's set in concrete. So whatever we believe causes our behavior is also stuck. Since we can't change what has happened, then she assumed that since I was abused, I am a worthless person. And that word "since" is a real key there. Since I was abused, then this is the result of it. And so she felt like she couldn't feel good about herself because she had been abused, and she could not undo the abuse, so she could not undo her bad opinion of herself. So that's why people get stuck in thinking they can't change or they can't improve their lives, because they think that something in the past is causing it. And usually when someone is asked to explain their behavior, they say, "Well, it's because." Spousal abusers do this all the time. The police will say, "Why did you beat up your wife and break her arm and put her in the hospital?" And he would say, "Well, because she burned the toast this morning." So he blamed.
It's ludicrous, but in his mind, somehow that makes sense.
That was the connection, that his behavior was caused by her burning the toast. So therefore, he felt irresponsible and not responsible for his bad behavior because she did it to me. She did not respect me enough or love me enough to cook the toast the way I like it, and she was paying attention to something else, taking care of the child or something, instead of attending to what I wanted her to do. So she caused my bad behavior. It's her fault. So it's a blaming type thing, when in fact all behavior is based on what people want to accomplish in the future. And this is what we call a paradigm shift. It's a shift in the brain, which when you grasp the idea, the whole world starts to make sense to you, and your own behavior starts to make sense to you. So behavior is always related to something I am trying to accomplish in the future, even though I may not know what that is. My mind may not be programmed and taught enough to know that my behavior, all behavior is future oriented. So we think it's caused, but instead it is, I do X, Y, or Z so that, or in order to. And so that's going to set the stage for our discussion today on the common beliefs that lead to criticism and punishment. Even though people don't know it, there's something they're trying to accomplish, but they can't identify it because they've never been asked that question.
Well, it was a paradigm shift for me when we were discussing this chapter, because you see this in almost every way we live. We live and we supposedly are and our identity is based on our experiences. And it feels like they are concrete sometimes, that those experiences have made us matter in more than one way, matter in that solidity, and that's what makes us matter. That is who we are. And you'll say, well, that you hear people, that's just who I am.
Exactly.
And when we've discussed it, and I'm also reading a lot about the science of what they're discovering these days of. We're almost all energy.
That's true.
We're not mostly matter. We're almost all energy, which is malleable. And it's almost like a work of art. If we could treat ourselves like a work of art in the energy field and look forward as opposed to the solidity of matter in the past.
And that is a scientific revelation and evidence that supports and backs up what this is all about as well. So it's two ways of looking at the same thing. Energy is flexible, it's malleable, it can be moved about and used, whereas matter is static, at least in our thinking. And we can't do anything about it. So it's the same idea with scientific evidence to back it up.
Wow, it's rocking my boat. I will tell you, it's exciting rocking. This is the potential, the portals to transformation are unlimited.
Well, that's what happened to this young lady when I worked with her. That when I explained this to her, that her behavior was purposive instead of caused, then that clicked in her brain and unlocked her so that she came to understand that she could feel better about herself. She could change her beliefs about herself that she thought were set in concrete because of what had happened to her. And so that was a turning point in her life to feel good about herself because she didn't feel trapped in the past.
Right. And that would definitely be an important shift to have, so that we stop punishing ourselves and we don't feel like we have to anymore, or to criticize ourselves. We can see, that's not who I want to be.
Yes.
But we have to come to that place first.
Yes. It's a difference between determinism and free will, philosophically. And here again, that is a paradigm shift.
So let's talk about the idea of self-punishment and self-criticism. What if you, I know that you've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, and I'm sure that not all of them make this shift, and maybe they're so stuck in their beliefs.
That is true.
How do you work with them with this self-punishment idea, this self-criticism, when they still are stuck in their beliefs, versus what might happen, or how one might deal with this self-criticism in a healthier way?
And Tony, that is usually the state in which someone would come to me as a therapist for help. They would feel stuck, or they wouldn't have come to me for help in the first place because they couldn't get past it. So I had to patiently work with them and build rapport with them and gradually introduce this concept that we've just been talking about, that behavior is so that, or in order to, rather than because. And that would take sometime weeks or a few months to help them get that paradigm shift working before we could get into this, because when I would ask someone, say, when they're abusing someone else, they're abusing themselves, then when I would ask the question, well, Sam, what are you hoping will happen, or hoping to accomplish or realize by doing X or Y behavior? And most of them would look at me like deer in the headlights of saying, I don't understand the question. What do you mean hoping to accomplish? I beat my wife because, or
I put myself down. I can't have that job. I'm not good enough because.
Yes,
Yes.
because I have failed at other things in my life, or my father was a failure, and so therefore I'm my father's son, and so therefore. So here again, they were talking and said in concrete terms, and so I would have to repeat it over and over again gently till they would get the idea. They'd say, well, let me think about that. And so I would help them shift their brain from past to future. What are you hoping will happen as a result of X, Y, or Z? And gradually people can begin to think in those terms, and it opens up a whole new vista in their heads of a new way of thinking. And so over the years, I was able to come up with this list of 10 so-called goals or attempts to accomplish something from having listened to my clients. I heard every one of these from my clients. That's where they came from. And it was amazing how creative
Their justifications are.
their justifications are.
Well, let's go over some of those. So these first 10 goals, they are goals, but there seems to be something that doesn't sit well with me as I read some of these goals. As I was reading them, I was feeling heavier and heavier. And but you tell me, that there's, if this is the choice that a person wants to make, they can do this.
Yes, that is an option. Like on the first one, Tony, I believe that by self-punishment, I can earn my forgiveness. You heard the old phrase, you do the crime, you do the time.
Right.
And they have television shows like Crime and Punishment, this kind of a thing.
No pain, no gain. We even have mottos for it.
Exactly the same thing. And so, and I will indicate to a person that, yes, that is an option. You can believe that you have to earn so-called forgiveness because they don't understand what forgiveness is. And by the way, there's a chapter later in the book about helping people understand really what forgiveness is and what it is not.
Okay.
So, and I can say, and they can be very adamant and say, oh no, I can't just forgive myself. That would be too easy. And that would be wrong. I have to punish myself. That's the way the world works. It's a balancing act. You do something wrong, you have to pay the price for it, and then you don't have to feel guilty about it anymore. And then I would say, well, yes, you can do that. That's an option. It's just a painful way of doing it or an unpleasant way of doing it, but you can. And if that's important to you to continue believing that that's what you must do, then I will show you how to do that. I will teach you how to earn your forgiveness. So a lot of people even feel stuck in, I have to earn my forgiveness, but that no one's ever told them how to do it.
So how might, before we move on to the healthier version of this, how might you tell a client how to earn forgiveness? I don't understand that.
Well, I use our flawed, yet that's the only system we have to work with, called our legal system, as an example. And I will bring this up, crime and punishment. You do the crime, you do the time. I can say, well, in our legal system, we have a way of doing that. If a defendant is accused and declared guilty of a crime, then either the jury or the judge determines, according to the law, what the punishment is that will equal the crime that's been committed. It's a balancing act. So if you rob a 7-Eleven store, you get 2 years in jail. If you murder someone, you get 20 or 30 or 40 years in jail, or under some circumstances, you get the needle. So the punishment is designed theoretically to fit the crime. And so, and I said, that's the first step you have to do. You have to determine the nature of your bad behavior, have to identify it. And then they start getting glassy-eyed on me on this
It's
one.
like, I didn't want to do this.
I say, identify what rule you've broken, what you did wrong, because you have to break a rule in order to believe you've done something wrong. So let's identify what the rule is. And then they go, the rule? What's that? So you have to identify what the rule is. And then say, now, is there already a punishment to that or a price you have to pay, or do you want to create one for yourself? And
So you go through the whole thing.
the process, and they get glassier-eyed as I talk. And they say, this is really complicated, isn't it? I said, yeah, but you have to do it correctly in order for it to work. And then I'd say to them, all right, now, what specific pain must you suffer? How would you impose that upon yourself? For how long a period? Will it be for a month or a year or 10 years? Or how long? And to what degree of pain do you feel like you need to cause yourself in order for you to believe that you have evened the score so you don't have to feel guilty and shame about your bad behavior anymore? So let's do it methodically so that when you get done, you know that you're done, and then you're free and clear of your guilt. So how do you want to do that? And by then they're going, let's talk about something else.
Yeah, but it's very similar to why people go to confession and then they get, do 24 Hail Marys.
It's exactly the same thing.
I don't know if I said that correctly since I'm not Catholic, but
Yes.
you're given a certain thing to do.
It's exactly the same thing. It is called penance. And it's the same idea. So if they do it methodically and accurately, then I can say, well, then that will work for you. Then you don't have to be beating up on yourself all the time. And so some of them go ahead and attempt to do that. And I assume that for some of them it does work, for some it might not, depending on their philosophical or religious beliefs and all of that. So I have to work with them. So the point is, I don't say they should not use these. I just say this is how you do it correctly so that it works for you.
Well, let's go over to number 1, the same thing about forgiving themselves, and talk about what that looks like as a healthy alternative.
Okay.
So I'm going to read number 1. They decide to forgive themselves for their mistakes because they care about themselves, not because they have earned forgiveness through suffering. They use their mistakes simply as a learning opportunity rather than an occasion for self-punishment. And that, again, I know we're getting to self-esteem down the road,
Right.
but that could be the beginning of self-esteem. Just acting as if I am, I'm a human being. I made a mistake. That's what human beings do. And I'm going to learn from this opportunity.
Yes. Now, here again, that is a paradigm shift. The same thing is discussed in my later chapter, as you mentioned, on how to develop a good self-concept. You can do it 2 ways. You can earn it, or you can give it to yourself as a gift of love. Either way works as long as you know how to do it. So I'm not telling them how to do it, or which one to choose. I'm just saying you can do that. So I just provided them an option. It's an alternative to self-criticism and punishment, but it doesn't have to be a replacement. You can still do it through pain and suffering and self-criticism. It's just a whole lot more painful than doing it this way.
Yes.
And Tony, I see these as healthy alternatives, and I use the word healthy, and by that I mean with less pain, less suffering, more joy, better relationships, a better feeling about yourself, the better ability to be the kind of person that other people want to be around. So healthy is not a moral issue here as much as it is a functional issue, is that you can do it through pain and suffering and criticism and shame. And I would call that unhealthy because it's painful and it's not beneficial to you as an individual, even though you think it may get the job done. These are alternatives that are more fun, they're not as painful, they're not as miserable.
And I would think that they also develop more resilience.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have really time to go through each and every one of them. I really encourage, if you are a listener and you don't have this book, get it, because you can go through each one, and I bet that we will all find ourselves in one of these 10 from time to time, and study them and think about what you've just said. But could you choose a few to read together?
Yes.
That you find are more widespread?
Let's see. Number 3 is a good one. Why don't you read the one that people usually do, and then I'll read the alternative to it.
Sounds good. I believe that by criticizing myself, I can appear hurt, sad, or needy. Other people will then feel sorry for me and love me. Even if they don't love me, they may at last give me some attention I might not receive otherwise.
And this is a very frequent reason for self-punishment, is that it does get a lot of attention. And I worked with someone not too long ago that is always putting himself down, and his wife unknowingly, but she learned a little bit later in our conversation, was enabling him in that behavioral pattern, because every time he criticized himself or called himself a loser or that no one cared about him, she would jump in and say, "Oh, now wait a minute, you really are lovable. I love you dearly. People just are really loved you." And,
so she was feeding into that.
She was feeding into it to trying to get him to change his mind. And so he was getting a lot of attention from her. And I taught her that she was undergirding his continuation of self-punishment because he got a lot of good strokes from her. And she was affirming him all the time and trying to get him to feel better about himself. And so he would do it over and over again. And she was wondering, why do I have to keep this doing over and over again? Because she was feeding it with all the good things she was saying about him that he wanted to hear.
And so if they say, well, that's my belief, how do you deal with that? Would it be something like, if he's choosing to act sad and hurt and needy, I guess you can keep doing that if you wish, but then counsel the spouse or partner and say, you need to know what he's doing.
Don't buy into it. It's sort of like a co-alcoholic or a co-addict. They contribute to it by not knowing how to not take the bait and buy into it and trying to help this person in a way that really feeds the behavior further.
Let's talk about what a healthier way to do this is, if you would read that.
Yes, the alternative is they realize that using self-punishment is a manipulative tool to get sympathy or love is ultimately self-defeating. They learn to receive love from others by practicing self-love first. So in the long run, really, someone is constantly putting himself or herself down is really not a fun person to be around. And that it really pushes most people away unless the person that they're complaining about themselves to is also caught up in that way of doing it, like I just explained.
It becomes a pattern.
And it becomes a pattern. So But other than that, unless you are one of those codependent people who will contribute to the problem by you trying to solve someone else's problem for them, which is part of codependency, then other people will not want to be around you. You have a hangdog look. You're always putting yourself down. Someone compliments you, say, "Oh, well, that was nothing. Anybody could have done it." And after a while, most people will get tired of saying, "I'm going to stop doing that with you because you don't know how to accept a compliment." So that's just a bunch of bull. And so people get tired of it. And I say, if you look at the results you get from using the philosophy of bad me, how do people generally respond to you? And most people say, well, they really don't like it very much.
Yeah.
I say, well, here's another way of doing it.
And it's a tricky thing if you come from a family that was, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Lots of families have a lot of criticism, and so they think that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's a tricky one, to have to start making that paradigm shift. But it comes back to maybe that doesn't feel comfortable to take those compliments, but what's working now, what I'm trying now doesn't work. How do I want to be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got to keep bringing it back
and
to that.
And that's the basic question. You can live painfully with self-criticism and punishment. That's an option. But would you like to consider another way that would make life a whole lot more fun for you? And sometimes it takes months or years for that paradigm shift to occur, but it's so effective when you get good at it that you never want to go back to the old system.
Let's do a couple more, and then the readers can go back but they're all slightly different. So it would be good just to let the listeners
let's
hear
look
a couple more.
Yeah, let's look at number 7. Why don't you read number 7 for us?
I believe self-criticism and punishment are the best ways to improve even my good performance. Complimenting myself and feeling good about what I do is being conceited. It's just what I was talking about. It also may make me self-satisfied, lazy, and unwilling to try harder next time. Remember, no pain, no gain. There it is.
Right. The alternative to this
is very American Protestant work ethic.
Oh, absolutely.
Right down the line.
Absolutely. The alternative is they realize that self-criticism is ultimately a poor motivator for improved performance. They find that placing emphasis on the positive aspects of their performance, even when it's below their expectations, is the best way to improve it. And that is true, by the way. You focus on your successes and not your failures, and it's a really great way to improve, though we're taught just the opposite. That we're criticized, you might do 9 things right, and you do one thing imperfectly, and that's what everybody focuses on. Of saying,
it's that negativity bias.
Yeah. You missed that part. You missed that note. You didn't tie your shoes right, type of thing. You look great, but are you going to wear that tie? That tie didn't go. So people pick out the negative in a punitive, critical way, rather than focusing on, hey, man, you look really great. You did really well there. I'm happy for you. Until
we take that on ourselves. As a piano teacher, I saw that in that world all the time.
Yes.
And it got to be where my students, and I would, we would work on things to work on, but when it got to performances, and I always tried to give them the good things first, but some of my students would come off a recital, might have made 1 or 2 minor mistakes, and they were hangdog, and they had failed. And so it was already programmed in very young children.
Yeah, and 2 or 3 year old kids.
Yeah.
They do it. I'll continue. Here again, this is the alternative. They also realize that objective evaluation of their performance for future improvement is always beneficial, but they stop criticizing themselves as a person, as failures or bad people, just because their performance was less than desired. So that's the difference between self-criticism and self-critique. It's good to critique our behavior, to evaluate it for the purpose of improvement if we want to. So it doesn't mean that you gloss over mistakes or bad behavior, but you evaluate them for improvement. I like to use the example of a rocket. When they fire a rocket up into space, which they're starting to do a whole lot more of right now, they have two additions to the rocket. One set are what we call retro rockets. They're little small rockets built into various places in the body of the rocket itself, so that if the rocket gets off course a little bit, the computer sends a message to these little rockets, and they'll go psst, 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 and they're
repositioning.
And they reposition and make a correction and get the rocket back on course. They have another aspect of a rocket, which is called a self-destruct device on it. So that if the rocket gets completely off course and cannot be corrected to get back on course, the computer tells the rocket to self-destruct, particularly if there's an explosive on board, so that it doesn't come back down and blow up a city or something. So the computer on there also has a self-destruct bomb on it to blow the rocket up if it goes out of control and is going to cause damage to the earth. Well, a lot of people use only the self-destruct.
It's all bad. It's all bad.
Yeah, they don't use the self-correcting system to get back on course. They see guilt as something as a punishment rather than as a learning experience. By the way, even our prison system has started using, instead of you'll see a sign out front of a prison. They used to be called the local prison, and now they call it the Department of Corrections.
Right.
So theoretically, it's designed to correct criminals' behavior by teaching them the lesson that says, here's what happens to you if you commit crimes. We hope you will learn from this and not do it anymore. And we know that that's a very poor system. It's not really a system of corrections. It's a system of usually helping the criminal learn how to be a better criminal.
Yes. But in theory, it would be a great idea.
So I share with them, you can use mistakes and critique them for learning and correction, which is good, but that doesn't mean you have to punish yourself for it. That's a waste of energy. It doesn't help anybody.
And it is very self-destructive. It
is. And it makes you a pitiful person to be around.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah. Well, let's see if there's any more. The last one, number 10, is really probably what a lot of people walk around with. My childhood authorities always told me that whatever went wrong was my fault. I was constantly asked, what did you do to make them act that way? Or they would say, now look what you caused. I decided then that if I caused someone's unhappiness with me, I could simply change my behavior and cause them to be pleased with me. By taking responsibility for a problem, I have the power to solve it. Even though self-blame is painful, it also gives me a sense of control over what others feel about me. I have seen this a lot with women, particularly. Taking the blame.
Oh, absolutely.
For their children, that was my fault, or taking the blame for their husbands. It seems to be kind of an epidemic with women, and probably has been through the generations.
You're absolutely correct. And the alternative here, and this was number 10, finally meaning number 10, they learn that taking responsibility for, quote, causing someone to reject them does not give them the power to make someone accept them. Indeed, they may need to change their behavior because it needs changing, but doing so gives them no control over the attitude or actions of others. It only affirms their power over themselves where it rightly belongs. So this is the identification of what power do you have. Instead of thinking that you have the power because you're the fault of it, like the mother that says, you kids are giving me a headache, or you kids will be the death of me yet, those kinds of things, which poorly trained parents do all the time. It's awful. So that the child thinks that, well, if I am quieter and I'm a better child, my mommy won't have a headache, or if I am a better kid, my mommy and daddy will get back together if they've gotten a divorce. So the child takes on that kind of responsibility, even though it feels terrible. That gives them that sense of power of fixing the problem. And as adults, we learn that that's no way close to the truth. It's never a child's responsibility or fault in a situation that goes on with the parents. And as adults, we can learn that and say, I'm not going to use my blaming myself and shaming myself or thinking that I'm causing someone else's bad behavior as a way to fix the problem. I may change my behavior because it's bad behavior, it needs fixing, but I'm not going to do all this self-punishment and shaming of myself in order to get other people to live better or have a better life or like me better. And here again, it's part of that paradigm shift.
Well, it's that word responsibility. And I like what I've heard you say through all these chapters about responsiveness. And they seem to be responsibility is really about being responsive. And by all of a sudden taking somebody else's bad behavior and trying to fix it yourself, that's not responsible either.
No, that's reactive. And there's the difference between reacting and responding. And there's a purpose for that word. If you break the word responsibility down, it is the ability to respond. That's all that means. So that's why I keep using the word respond, which means in a healthy way, you take charge of the situation and learn the skills of doing something correctly to actually solve a problem or to accomplish a healthy goal, rather than just reacting automatically to what your culture has taught you to do inappropriately and destructively. So responsibility means I have choice. My behavior is not caused, it's in order to, and I can choose my future. I can't change my past, but I can choose my future by changing my behavior and changing the way I think. And that's being responsible, is not getting caught up in this sense of helplessness that it's not my fault or I can't do anything about it.
Well, I think that's a good place to end right there. That's a very powerful statement. Let me just read the very last paragraph because I think it is important. Changing any habit is difficult at first. It seems unnatural and wrong simply because it is different from our normal behavior. Breaking the habit of self-criticism and self-punishment will take time and effort, but the results are worth it.
Let me give you a real quick story on that,
Okay.
and then we'll close. One time I was doing a seminar for a group of people, and I had a question and answer period afterwards, and one of the ladies in the front row raised her hand timidly, and she said, "Dr. Austin, I have a question. I feel kind of strange asking it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But I've never been to a therapist before. Could you help me understand what a therapist does?" and I said, "Oh, of course, I can tell you that real quickly." And she said, "Really? Can you do it?" And I said, "Yes." And I paused for a moment and I said, "My job is to help people do the right thing, no matter how guilty it makes them feel." And I had a number of people in the class who had been to see me or who had been to see a good therapist, and so I saw smiles and nods all over the place and some giggles. But that's what all of this is all about. At first, you feel like it's wrong. It's
unnatural.
It's unnatural.
There's nobody around you's doing it like this.
No, so you have to learn to feel comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because at first, doing it correctly is not going to feel comfortable because it's not the way we're normally taught to do it. So you have to learn to do the right thing no matter how guilty it makes you feel.
I love that. Well, join us on the next chapter, How to Make Right Decisions, Chapter 8. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Again, Dr. Austin's ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We look forward to having you join us for our next podcast.